Alright, we're back again with another little pet project. We got this little cheap Chinese ATV chassis. The engine and transmission died a long time ago, and I didn't want to just scrap the frame, but after a while I finally decided to do something with this thing. And most people would probably do the same thing with this, and that is just put a cheap Harbor Freight engine in the thing and just kind of turn it into a ATV go-kart kind of vehicle. That Harbor Freight engine is actually an older generation engine, missing the carburetor because, well, carburetors tend to be the biggest thing that go bad on those small engines. But really all we're going to be doing is just mounting the engine in this little open area right here, relocating the fuel tank or adding a different fuel tank instead of that one based on how I could fit everything in there, and redoing the exhaust system where I'll have some type of pipe or something going out the back, probably with a different muffler. Probably going to be a bunch of welding in this project, so we're not going to be using a lot of original stuff. We're just going to kind of shoot from the hip and just piece this garbage together to build us some junk out of junk. But the biggest thing I need to do first is break this engine down, in the sense that this has got to go, this has got to go, and this pulley's got to go, and this little bracket right here, so I could put this centrifugal clutch on here and start actually fitting this engine in place. So we go ahead and get that done, and here we are. We're all stripped of our gas tank, exhaust system, and that old pulley. In place of the old pulley, I put a centrifugal clutch on here. I will have to find a bolt to go in this shaft here and lock it in with a big washer so this thing doesn't walk off when it's running. But other than that, we could go ahead and test fit this thing. And here we are. Our preliminary fitting had me have to switch around our centrifugal clutch where the sprocket is on the inside instead of the outside, because with the sprocket on the outside, the engine would have had to be way over that way in order to be in line with the chain, which is right here. And with the chain sitting as it is now, the only way for our engine to be sitting somewhat decently centered, our clutch would have to be flipped around. So with that, we're good as far as our initial setup. Got enough room here for all intents to put my feet. I will have to trim this little fender panel right here a little bit, but other than that, with our engine about right there, looking at it, yeah, we should be pretty good. Like, the engine's literally going to have to sit right here, because if I go too far back, our spark plug wire, all this hardware, which may or may not have to come off, would be hitting against our frame. And then of course the recoil start would be bouncing up against this brake pedal right here just as well, and it'll take away from the foot space too. But it's still early. We're gonna see what else we might have to remove if I do intend on moving this engine back a little bit. Stand by. Alright, we're gonna keep the engine as far forward as it was able to go, and we're just gonna have to add some chain to the thing, and maybe quite possibly add some type of idle or sprocket to put tension on the chain midways down. But what I ended up doing here was taking some scrap metal, cutting a plate that I'll weld in this area so I could drill the 2 holes for the front of the engine, then a piece of angle iron that I cut to also fit in this area right here. That'll have the other back holes for mounting the engine. So go ahead and get this thing welded up. All right, we got everything welded in place. We got our rear cross member down, along with our plate. Get over here to see a little bit of that over there, all welded in. Got the engine in place for fitting purposes. So now with that, I have to mark some holes so I can drill the holes to mount this thing. more than likely I'm probably going to have to make a cardboard template at the bottom of the engine and then use that to mark the holes on the metal. So go ahead and get that done. And here we are. Engine is solidly mounted. We only have 3 bolts in place out of 4, 3/8 bolts with lock nuts. The 4th bolt unfortunately couldn't be put in because the hole on the engine is literally right over the frame rail there, so there's no chance of getting that in there. But with that all said and done, the next little bitty thing we could do is mount a fuel tank, the original one that was on this ATV. Since we had to take the tank off of the engine, it only makes sense to use the ATV's fuel tank in its place. So I'm gonna get that on and then see what other little crap I could do in the meantime, since I still have to get a few bits and pieces to help complete this thing. Alright, with that simple little act of bolting down our gas tank out of the way, the next thing I wanted to address was the exhaust system. Since we can't use the original muffler where it would have sat on the cylinder head, we have to fabricate some garbage. Now I still want to use this muffler, but the idea that I'm visualizing is moving the muffler to some point right here, and the little bracket that couples the muffler to the cylinder head has already been hacked in half, and the part that bolts to the cylinder head is in place because the next move is going to be to weld up a hunk of pipe to that little half piece, and then I'm probably going to have to cut this pipe and then get another angle up and weld the other piece of that flange to the pipe, so then I could go ahead and attach it right back to the muffler and then weld a hanger to the muffler in order to hold it right here. It's going to be pretty janky, it's going to be pretty bootleg looking, and it's probably going to have a choke point right there at that 90-degree angle, but don't really have a lot of options. So all we can do is just try this garbage and see what happens, because the only other option would be to have the muffler or have an exhaust pipe coming straight out, or at least coming out in a way where it's going to be right in the way of where I'd have to put my feet and leg, and having hot exhaust gases blasting onto my leg, nah, we're not doing that. We're going with the janky crap right there. So stand by. All right, let's take a look at the fuckery we got going on here. As stated before, I was going to have a pretty sharp 90-degree angle right here coming from the flange on the cylinder head. Going out, I had to actually cut the pipe right here and cut a little notch in it so I could get a slight angle, because down here, if I didn't do that, when I do put the chain on there, it would be like rubbing right up against the bottom right there. So I had to notch that so I could get it up a little bit, so now it will clear the chain. But then we also have another sharp bend right here. There we go, focus. Got another sharp bend right here welded up, and then going straight back to the other half of the flange where it bolts up to our original muffler. And then I have a little bracket right there welded in place and bolted up right here, so everything is still removable if need be. But yep, that's our whole exhaust system. Nothing more than some conduit welded in place to move our muffler way to the back right here, so at least it exhausts out that way. So with that all said and done, got everything else in here. Still need to get a carburetor. Also need to get some chain so I could actually get the chain hooked up and all. And well, once we do that, we should be able to fire this pile up. So home stretch. Okay, another thing I decided to get out of the way was fabricating a seat for this thing, because I don't have the original seat. As with everything else on here, I had to improvise, and that improvisation takes the form of a piece of 3/4 inch pressure treated plywood that I had left over that was up there serving as a makeshift table. I cut a rough rectangle out and then trimmed it around and around until I got it to where it fit pretty decently over this open area right here. I cut a notch right there in order to allow the piece to sit flush against this mounting point right here and not sit on top of that bolt. I have 2 mounting points right here for some metric bolts that I got to drill the holes, or finish drilling the holes for, so I could secure that side down. Then I got to drill a couple more holes right here so I could use some nuts and bolts to get this side down. As an added bonus, I took a piece of bed frame and cut and welded that piece in the center right here to serve as extra reinforcement. Even though that 3/4 inch plywood is more than able to support my big ass, I'd rather have that redundancy because, well, if I'm riding and bouncing around, the last thing I want is for this thing to buckle under my weight. And with that piece of bed frame there, that should not happen. So with that all said and done, go ahead, get this thing mounted down, and then maybe at some later date I'll figure out some type of cushioning or something. If I could find some bulk padding or who knows what, I'll get to that eventually. I just need a seat on here so I could actually be able to sit down while riding this thing, even if it does hurt my ass. So let me finish this up. Okay, we got our seat bolted down as stated before, 4 bolts. Another thing I took a moment to do was get some number 40 chain routed around this thing, but because of the position of everything, I'm going to have to put a half link in here along with the master link, because it's in just a position where 1 link makes it too short, 2 links makes it too long. Another thing I had to do in order to incorporate our chain was chop off these 2 cross member pieces from the old engine because, well, the chain was pretty much rubbing against all that garbage. So it does really take away from the structural integrity of the frame, since we have other cross members and stuff on here. This was mainly just engine support crap. So with that, the other thing we could go ahead and do is bolt our carburetor down. This little kit off Amazon comes with a carburetor, fuel filter, hose, and even a spark plug. So I'm gonna go ahead, put all this garbage on the engine, plumb it to the gas tank, and see if I'm gonna even incorporate some type of air filter in here. Not sure, because our feet have to go right there. So let me go ahead and put this carburetor on here and get this garbage hooked up some more. Stand by. Okay, we got our carburetor in. Still have our stock linkage with all the hookups to the governor and everything. I don't have the air cleaner on yet for the sake of being able to show everything up here. One of the other things I managed to do was get the throttle cable hooked up, which that cable routes around to the driver's side. As you can see, going up there, comes up along the handlebars, and then it goes right here into the stock throttle lever right here. So with that, we have our throttle function, and that's hooked up to the lever right here, which is spring loaded to the governor arm, which in turn has a linkage going to the throttle butterfly in the carburetor. And then there's a return spring right here to pull on the governor arm. As for our air cleaner, that's a simple thing where we just put that on and we'll be able to bolt that down. Now, well, the base of the air cleaner, I should say, because the actual air cleaner is not even on here, and as you can see, it'll have to be something customized because the stock box is not really going to be able to go on here that easily, if at all. But that's neither here or there. Later on, I'll probably put some kind of 90-degree tube or something that can go to the back where I could put a regular little cone filter on there. But we also have our fuel filter and fuel line hooked up going down into the carburetor. There's a valve cover breather hose I have to hook up to the air cleaner once I secure that, and everything else is pretty much ready to rock and roll. So let me finish those couple things and I'm gonna go and see how this thing acts. So stand by. Well, engine starts. Let's see if we can do anything. Wheel.
gonna need a little more gearing in this thing. Yeah, we might need a little more gearing in this thing. Looking at the gearing we got here, compared to our normal gearing there, 10 teeth on the clutch, I don't think we got near enough gearing on this axle here. That kind of sucks. Well, back to the drawing board. Gonna have to find a bigger sprocket. So, at least the engine runs. And then again, even though this thing should be able to run with a 210 pounder chunky like me, it ain't doing it. So, yeah, gotta get some more gearing in this thing. Stand by. We'll see if somebody a little bit lighter will be able to make this thing move. Hit it. Hit it. Doesn't have the juice that I thought it would have, but getting a little more, just a little bit more movement, but not quite. Well, I mean, a little bit of weight reduction was what was required to make it run, but it still really didn't have the kind of initial get up and go that I was hoping for. So yeah, in the end, we're gonna have to make that gear a little bit bigger. So we're gonna stop for a second and do a little research, see what we can find to fix that problem. Stand by.
Okay, since this thing doesn't have the gearing to pull my big ass around, I'm gonna have to upgrade that sprocket to a wider, more teeth sprocket. Looks like it's gonna be pretty simple. It's only 3 nuts that hold the tire on, so I can get the tire off. Then I'll have to get this hub off right here, which looks like a simple king nut right there, or castle nut. And after that, just these 4 bolts right here that remove the sprocket from the axle, which should then just come straight off, and then putting a new one on, a reverse of all that. So go ahead and get this thing off real quick, take our chain off, get our 4 bolts off, and then pop all that garbage off. So stand by. Well, we got our new gear in, the larger, shinier one, of course. As you can see, there's more teeth, more circumference. So hopefully this will be enough to give the little Predator engine the torque necessary to pull any average adult around, much less my big ass. So we'll go ahead and take our new gear, bolt it back up, see how many inches of extra chain I'm gonna have to add on to this thing, and get it all together. So give me a quick second here. Let me get the sprocket on. All right, we got our big gear on there. Had to add a little bit extra chain, maybe about 2 inches, with an extra link, of course. And I also had to chop off a little lip. There's a little lip that was right here to shield the rotor, as well as another one that was right there. And obviously with the wider gear, that little lip had to go. So with that, I'll go ahead and get our wheel back on and fire this thing up and see what happens.
Okay, our test run, for all intents, was successful, save for a couple hiccups in the form of this thing throwing the chain off. The links kept snapping for some reason. Whether that's because I don't have any idler sprockets midways through this 3-foot long chain, or for some other reason, I ended up just going ahead and welding fresh links in. Instead of putting the snap clips in there, I just welded the clips together, and that was enough to keep the chain in one piece so I can ride this thing up and down the driveway. Now, of course, idler sprockets will probably be in this thing's future, but another thing I'm gonna have to do is make a shield to go over here to help shield one's leg from both the exhaust pipe and our questionable chain. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of that. In the meantime, the experience riding this thing tells me that this thing is just good enough to be sketchy and dangerous, obviously, because this is a kiddie go-kart, and adults riding on this thing with probably an engine that's twice as powerful as what was in there makes this thing, well, fun and dangerous, because you got to anticipate your moves before you make them. Otherwise, you try to make an abrupt turn, you're going off to the side. And with the throttle and brakes on the same handle, you definitely got to plan your moves ahead of time. So yeah, let me get the shield on here and we'll go ahead and conclude things. Stand by. Okay, here's what we came up with. Using a dryer door for sheet metal, I managed to cut a panel out to match the angles and contours and notches of our framework, so the piece fits in there pretty good. Secured with self-tapping screws around key points. So we got the exhaust system covered and half the length of the chain covered, so if the chain does come off, we'll be less likely to get hit by the flying chain, and we're not going to be burning ourselves on the exhaust system. So at least with that all said and done, we could pretty much say that this project is complete-ish. So we're gonna have other stuff we want to do to this thing, so stay tuned for that. So I feel like playing around with this thing a lot more, just because, well, it's got the right amount of sketchiness to make it kind of fun. So as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, TikTok, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for more of this thing, because there's going to be more of this thing as I come up with more crap to do to it. So gonna get inside because the weather is starting to become questionable, so get this thing covered up, and then I'm gonna get undercover. So I'll catch you later. I'm out.